So we're here today with, well, I guess I'm here today. No one else is here but me and him. With a good friend from many years ago, Alex from Backlog Battle. I assume you're okay with me using your name, considering you use it all the time. But
I mean, that's the frickin' intro, man. Like, hey, what's up, everyone? Alex here. It's like at this point, people are like, somebody actually approached me, via comments the other day, and they said, like, what's really comforting about your videos is like every time you say, "What's up, everyone? Alex here." So I really appreciated that.
Well, there you go. So we first met many, many moons ago when we were at a Final Fantasy XIV convention, and this was in the very early days of Ultima Final Fantasy, the Ultimate Final Fantasy podcast, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And we decided, even though we weren't able to get tickets for the event, the 14 event in Las Vegas, Joe and I already had time off for work, and I said, you know what, let's just go down there and see if we can get in somehow. We go down there. It's not really working out very well in the beginning. I start drinking as per usual, and I'm walking around talking to people about Final Fantasy, realizing that almost no one there actually likes Final Fantasy other than 14.
What? That's crazy.
So I'm getting kind of bummed out, and I'm like, damn, man, like we came down here, nobody wants to talk like Final Fantasy. There's a few people that did, but
yeah,
almost everyone is here, obviously, for the 14 event that's happening. And I'm walking around, and then I end up running into you, and you were talking about, I can't remember what you were talking about, but it was something about like your YouTube channel, and I was like, oh, that's really cool. Like, what do you do? And that's when you talked about Backlog Battle, which is obviously what you're known for. And I was really into that idea because I was like, oh man, that's like such a cool idea for someone like me that just has so many video games that I've bought over the years and never finished. It's like, if you made a show about it, then you'd have a reason to finish it all. That, in addition to the fact that you bought them all, which you probably should play them if you bought them. But
yeah.
But I was really into the idea, and then we got to talking, and you mentioned to me, you're like, well, I was able to get in. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? You're like, yeah, all I did was walked up to them and told them that I had a YouTube channel, and they verified it, and they let me get in with a press pass. And I was sitting there, Pabst blue ribbon in hand, amazed. And I was like, man, this is awesome. So the next day I go up to the guys, I hand them our little business card, because we printed out all these business cards because we're like, let's make it like a thing where we'll try to recruit a bunch of listeners while we're here. And so we handed them one of them. They checked out our website. Everything looked good to them, obviously, and we got in thanks to you.
Nice. Good stuff.
Yeah. Fast forward 6.5 years, and here we are, both still going strong. We certainly took different paths, though, and that's one of the things I want to talk about today. Yeah. I don't know if we took different paths so much as you were already on your path, and we said we didn't want to deal with that path, and now I'm like, probably should have dealt with that path.
I mean, we have a lot of years to catch up on, right? Because it's like, kind of like what you said, it's like, it is kind of like 6.5 years since then. And if I remember correctly, like I was still on Twitch in 2014, and and it's kind of interesting too, because like I did have I still did have like the Backlog Battle podcast as well, no YouTube channel, And, I was just kind of doing my thing and, and doing that. But like you guys, like over the years, we've been friends since then. And, you guys have been doing the podcasting for like a long time. And I'm pretty sure like you and I can share a lot of information about that because like I recently, of course, went back into podcasting after like a whole year of hiatus. And, man, that's a whole other story entirely. My God.
Yeah. Well, one of the big differences, I didn't realize you didn't have a YouTube in the beginning. What did you do in the beginning then? Was it just a podcast still when we
Yeah,
first
yeah, pretty much. Like, so I did a lot of, podcasting. And so at the time, I was actually still doing a podcast with an old friend of mine. And we had been kind of doing this, this particular version of the podcast proudly for every week since it started. And I think I want to say like we were up to about like 100, 150 episodes up until that point. Like, and we had taken no breaks in terms of our recording. In other words, if you had been listening since the very beginning, you would have gotten an episode of the Backlog Battle podcast every single week, even over like Christmas breaks, because we were doing this thing where we would pre-record episodes, especially when we
yeah.
want to take a vacation, and so we would have like 4 or 5 episodes ahead and stuff, and it was fresh content and stuff, even though looking back, it's like it's not so fresh content. We were talking about Xenogears every single year, and of course, me later on Final Fantasy 14 every year. So there's this cyclical kind of nature that kind of took over the show and stuff over time. But yeah, like it was that, and then Twitch. I was starting out, and then around the following year, the year after we met, like that's where I kind of hit my stride and stuff, and I started getting like 100 like views like every time I showed up and stuff. It was really crazy. It was really crazy stuff. And again, like very early in what was gonna be Twitch and stuff. It's still Twitch, but like it wasn't crazy as it is now. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there weren't a bunch of, girls doing Q&As and like pools. Like
Hey, yeah.
it was still kind of a thing. There was like yoga. I remember being like, "Wow, this is really weird." But now it's like just whatever you want, which
hmm
has its benefits, but it also has its downsides. I think when it comes to Twitch,
Yeah.
um, especially with their loose application of their rules, they like to turn a blind eye to a lot of stuff, but then really crack down on certain things. And it's like, I mean, I get it; it's their deal, but like, if you want to keep the platform pure, you probably shouldn't have opened the floodgates to all this other crap. But
Yeah, the way that I see it, right? It's kind of like how YouTube was in the early days as well, right? Like it was the Wild West, everything goes. There was no copyright until copyright happened, right? Which is
yeah,
kind of like what kind of starting to snowball a lot of these other issues that Twitch has. And what I want to say is that even when I started on Twitch and actually getting to the popularity that I had back in 2015, I already saw a lot of the problems of the platform even before Amazon bought them, right? Like fully integrated them into their system, even. And so, and I kind of noticed too, like a lot of old Twitch folk that used to work at Twitch started quitting the company. And to me, like that was a bad sign. I was like, wait a second. These guys were known in the community to be, the kind of not gatekeepers in a negative sense, but like the more positive role models that were working on Twitch starting to leave. Like I was like, okay, that's not good. Like, there's like, is anybody noticing this? And apparently at the time, like I was the only one who noticed it. And of course, as you said, over time, they just kept on opening and opening the gates until now you have all these societal issues and cultural issues that they need to kind of take care of that they should have taken care of when they were smaller that is now kind of plaguing the platform overall. Whereas like, when I actually, because I used to have a YouTube channel back in 2010, 2009. And if you think about YouTube then, that's when they started implementing the copyright stuff. And unfortunately, when they did that, obviously nothing was perfect, right? But when I jumped to YouTube, which was around 2016 or 2017, like there had been more than, like half a decade's worth of technology and improvements that I kind of felt like, okay, this platform is mature now. Let's, take this for a spin to see like if I can actually make something out of this, like to make something out of like a YouTube channel these days, and that's kind of like really why I moved from Twitch to YouTube, because I felt like Twitch, for that matter, like as a platform, needed to catch up to YouTube really fast. And I believe that it's, the responsibility of these tech companies, with whatever millions that they're getting in their banks and stuff, like to catch up, like wholesale. Like this isn't like a World of Warcraft versus Final Fantasy 14 situation. You know what I mean? It's like even Final Fantasy 14, they knew like let's borrow some ideas from World of Warcraft so we can catch up and then build our own legacy. Twitch didn't even do that. They're literally like, oh, we need copyright now. Let's not look at what other people are doing. We're gonna do our own shit. And and here we are, right?
Yeah. I don't know how I feel about some of that. I mean, I understand the YouTube thing. I honestly kind of prefer YouTube back in the Wild Wild West days, because those were the days where you could actually have a video that went viral. That's
Mm-hmm.
just one guy's video. Like, it's not a person that went viral, it's a video that went viral. And I think with the advent of a lot of the advertising, as great as it is for, revenue for the company and revenue for people like you and I, it does
Mm-hmm.
have its downsides where videos just sit there. And, I found some hilarious videos that if they were released 10 years ago, they would have been, they would have been golden. They would have been
Mm-hmm.
a viral video. But because of the way YouTube went with the algorithms and the advertising and things like that, it's just pushed aside. And so it
Mm-hmm.
seems like people are able to go more viral, but little individual videos aren't. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, the copyright thing is super annoying too. I mean, I
Yeah.
get it, but it just sucks when when all I'm doing is uploading streams of me,
Mm-hmm.
and there have been ones that have just been completely removed because of copyright for a song in the game. And I'm
Yeah.
like, it's like, I'm not putting it up there to steal your music. Like, honestly, most of the music isn't. I mean, it's good, but the ones that are hard copyrights are like vocal tracks in some of these games, and I'm like, I really
Mm-hmm.
generally hate the vocal tracks in Final Fantasy. So like,
Yeah.
if you want to take it down, you can, but I assure you, I'm not like letting someone listen to your song for free. Like,
Yeah,
I don't.
if you want to talk about like copyright and stuff, like the music industry is kind of really causing a lot of these problems, right? Like, and the problem is that kind of like what you said, it's not like you're uploading these so that people can listen to the track, amidst hacking and slashing and grunts from like Titus and stuff like that. Like it's you're not
Yeah.
really trying to, or Titus. I'm sorry. Like I'm pretty sure I'm gonna get like flamed like, as soon as like I mispronounce his name. But like and I think if anything, it's a lot of the problems that's stem from that really, right? There was one time when I streamed GTA 5 just for the hell of it, right? Because I was like, I'm almost to the end of the game. I want to stream the end, and I was streaming it through my PS4, and I was kind of like, and really feeling myself. I was like listening to the songs on the radio and stuff like that. And then I finished the game and I was like asking, like, I was kind of asking, like, hey, has anybody like listened to this song that's playing? And they're like, no, we haven't, like, because we can't hear anything. And I'm like, wait a sec, what? And he's like, yeah, we haven't heard any song play in the game. In other words, you're literally singing by yourself to a song that we can't hear. I'm like, oh, that's embarrassing. So it's like
Yeah.
this impromptu karaoke thing. And, to me, that's kind of silly because, for one thing, it's almost like the music industry in general has no throttle of like what is okay for the playback of the music. Like, it's just like, black or white. It's like, it's either you pay us or you don't. And if you don't, you can't use anything. Not knowing that, these kinds of, kind of audience based, interactive kind of mediums and stuff allow people to discover musicians through, through a very different way of discovery. Like, honestly, like, who the hell like listens to the radio these days anyway compared to like pulling up and making their playlists on Spotify. It sounds like a
Yeah.
very antiquated concept, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I get that, and it is difficult because it'd be one thing if you monetize it for yourself, like if the company or whoever made the song and has the rights to their own music monetized my video or at least part of it, that'd
Hmm.
be one thing. But to remove it completely, that's what really bothered me. And I was just
Yeah.
like, it's just dumb. And then on streams, it's the same way. I had
Hmm.
we were setting up one of the iterations of Ultima Final Fantasy's websites,
Hmm.
like probably like 5 years ago, 4 years ago, something like that. And one, I was playing some Megadeth in the background, and I paused it a little after I started the stream, and it only caught like 1 second of the song, and it still like blacked out
Wow.
all of that from the song. And I'm like, dude,
Hmm.
I get it if it's a video after the fact, but while I'm sitting
Yeah.
there streaming it, like, really, you're gonna mute it immediately?
Hmm.
I don't know. It just seems it almost seems like the best way for the gaming industry to go is just all in-house tracks, and
Hmm.
to never have a situation like with Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core,
Hmm.
where it'll never get remade because they stupidly had a famous Japanese singer put his own track in there, and it's been in
Yeah.
like music industry limbo hell for ever since. Basically, no one can get the rights to it. Like, so, like, to remake the game, it's just never going to happen, as far as I can
Hmm.
tell. Not that I think Crisis Core, I'm not like salivating over the idea of a remake of that game or anything. It's just a lot of
Hmm.
people want it, and the reason why they can't have it is because they threw in a song from a real person, and it's like,
Yeah.
don't do that, because then it's not yours, and you can't
Hmm.
then dictate when you re-release your own game. It's now
Yeah.
in someone else's hands, which is, I mean, to me, that's just a really stupid idea. That's like outsourcing to the fullest extent. Oh, and for such a minor
Hmm.
aspect too.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah,
The-
I don't know. I don't mind YouTube. I use it. It's mostly just like a dumping ground, which is why our YouTube channels are so sad.
oh
The
no.
podcasts are huge, but the
Yeah.
YouTube channel is like, I don't even think Ultima has 1,000 followers on YouTube, and it's because it's
Yeah.
seriously just it's just where we go and dump everything en masse. And we've only
Hmm.
recently started to try and change that because it's like, yeah, it
Yeah.
kind of looks like shit, like it's everything's everywhere. Like, maybe we should put the Final Fantasy 11 all like, you know, 12 days of it. Like, maybe we should put those videos in order and like kind of
Hmm.
spruce it up a little bit. But that's one of the things that I think is really one of the big differences between the paths that we took. You kind of jumped ship from the podcast, at least to a certain extent. You've obviously come back
Hmm.
recently, and you
Yeah.
did say you did about 100 episodes before, and you
Hmm.
went more of the YouTube route. What was the decision making that went into that? Like, what made you change your mind or change it from the podcast to, I'm going to focus on YouTube exclusively? What was your
So
mentality there?
yeah, that's actually a really good question because it wasn't just the podcast, but it was also Twitch. Because
Right.
I let me answer the Twitch one first because it's actually really easy. It's not just, by the way, what I just said earlier, which is, oh yeah, the future of Twitch didn't seem to align with what I was doing, but it's also the culture of what it means to be a live streamer in the future, right? Because every single person that I spoke who was a Twitch partner at the time, and it still is, by the way, has had problems where if they take a week vacation, they drop revenue by like thousands of dollars, right? And there's no stability in that unless you're like one of the top tier people, like Ammunition, Co Carnage, Zeke, where that kind of loss of subscribers is subsidized by advertising and sponsorship, right? And
Hmm.
if you really, and if you, and this was like back in 2015 when I left, mind you. So like now, not that Anne was back then, but like, but even now, if you look at the landscape of how Twitch is, it's kind of the same, right? Like the people who really benefit are the ones who are like really up top, like making a lot of money. And then here's the people chomping at the bit who are affiliates, which it's, it's fine. It's great that you're making money, but it's like you're not being helped to be discovered on the platform unless you really work hard to entrench yourself in somebody's community and then get promoted organically. Like, in other words, you're not going into every single person's popular person's chat room and spamming your channel, right? Like, you're actually being a fan of somebody else. And that takes a long time. But more importantly, as I said, if you're not those upper echelon people, like, you're going to be working really hard for like maybe a fraction of, like the payout and stuff in a way, and the viewership even. It's and for me, I started looking at the people who were at the top, right? Like, I looked at Co Carnage. I admire the guy immensely. He's able to make it work between him and his family. But look at all the other people who are top tier Twitch people, and look at how many people are single versus how many of them have families that they take care of, and stuff like that. So within that top tier echelon, you'll notice that the people who have families and stuff is kind of less than the amount of people who are actually single. And for me at the time, I was making this transition with my wife where, we want to, at the time we were still dating, but like we want to get married eventually, and, like probably have a family, maybe not, and I felt like with the way that Twitch was and the way that it was going in the future, there's no way you can sustain yourself with just Twitch alone. Like, unless you're Co-Carnage or Markiplier or Ammunition or all those guys. And I sure as hell is not going to go to Mixer, right? And look what happened to Mixer. And
Yeah.
so that's why I left Twitch. The podcast, on the other hand, I felt as though, for the very reasons I said earlier, when things started getting cyclical, I kind of noticed like that I needed a major change, and for that, like, I at the time, my co-host at the time, we were doing really well, but he also started having um, some really bad health issues, to the point where, he was basically like his stomach and inner body was deteriorating, and he didn't want to get surgery because he wanted to do the podcast. And so yeah, and I was like, no, 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 dude. Like, you need to prioritize your life properly, because you have a son that you're taking care of. He should be your priority right now, not the podcast. The podcast will go on, whether it's, with you or without you or what have you. You don't have to worry about that. Your legacy is intact for 100, 200 plus episodes, for that matter. And, and it took a lot of coaxing to kind of have him to realize that. And so during that time, I kind of brought in a friend to take over, like the podcasting duties. And and I kind of opened the door to my friend. I said, like, look, you can come back and stuff, like, and he kind of found some peace with that, right, for a good time. And then, but I was still doing a podcast like the way that we did before. And it just felt to me that it was rehashing the same kind of things over and over. And we were kind of hitting this plateau where the podcast is kind of getting stale, right? And
Yeah.
so I kind of decided, like around early last year, where I said we need to hit pause, for the podcast, or stop it completely. And we kind of decided with my current, my last co-host, to kind of stop it permanently. And months prior, we were kind of going to kind of do like monthly stuff to kind of um, add more hype to each episode, but that didn't work out too well because our schedules kind of conflicted. And so I stopped last year, and then I came back this year. And we'll get to YouTube. I know this is a very long-winded story, Caleb. So, do
No,
apologize.
take your time. That's
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
we got years to catch up, so
I know. So
we're
I
we're
brought it.
only in we're only in what, like, I guess we're in 2020 now, but
Yeah,
for
yeah,
one of the many little threads of the conversation we've caught up, but we've got plenty of those other ones that are still back in
for
2014,
sure.
so
Yeah.
take it away. Yeah, you're good. You're good.
So, so yeah, so like I brought back the podcast this year because, for one thing, It was more of a reaction to what I knew was missing in terms of my skill set, which is I feel like I can do better as an interviewer and a conversationalist. And the biggest challenge that I kind of thrusted myself into was that I wasn't going to have a co-host, and this was more necessitated by a conversation that I had with my former co-host, where he said like I can't do this, at all because I'm already a part of three other podcasts, and so I got this idea of bringing new hosts, guest co-hosts like every week to talk about them, and and that's kind of like why it's back. But, and here's the big one. You said when you uploaded your podcast episodes on YouTube, like it's kind of, it's kind of okay, right? Like it's there, but it's not like, big or anything like that. And that's kind of something that I experienced myself when I started uploading video versions on a podcast. And so actually, depending on when this comes out, you know, my podcast is audio only again. And we've tried three times over the past 4 years to make video versions of the podcast. It just, nobody's interested on that in YouTube. Just nobody. But the good news is that the listenership for the podcast has increased since then. And so that's kind of a nice, weird roundabout way. But
Yeah,
anyways, yeah.
I think what you're getting at is kind of what we've done for years. So it's always been the podcast is like the monolith, right?
Hmm.
It's the thing that we've all wanted. It's the thing that, at least Joe and I, that's our big shtick is the podcast. And doing the Twitch and doing the YouTube and doing all the other shit is just to make the podcast bigger. Even though
Right.
these other platforms like YouTube, we'd be making a lot more money if we would have went the Final Fantasy Union route and just had bullshit, gimmicky titles to all of our videos and not know. And we would have to, we'd have to not know anything about Final Fantasy as well. But we won't go down
Yeah.
that road. No, I wonder if they even know we're like rivals, or if we're just like it's like just our own invented rivalry.
I
I
think it's
I
fun.
I think it is too, and we actually wrote a script. I don't know if you remember this is kind of tangent, but the one of the Patreon goals for Ultima back in the day, it was to write a script of UFF versus FFU, and we've
Yeah.
written it. It's written, but I haven't. I want to get them to voice their characters, even though it is like it's not good. Like it's
Mhm.
very they I don't think they'll like it, but I think it would be amazing if they did it just in the spirit of competition. And
Mhm.
like I mean, yeah, so for them it was all the YouTube and the podcast was like an extra thing, right?
Mhm.
Because their podcast was on like a big site that had a lot of viewership and
Yeah.
the site was the thing and then their YouTube is their thing. So our mentality was always, well, I'm playing an MMO, and this is when I first started streaming, was Final Fantasy 11. And I said, you know
Mhm.
what? It's I was interested in streaming before as like my for myself because I wanted to get before we did the podcast, I wanted to do something like this, like a
Mhm.
YouTube or a podcast or like something. And at first we were doing like little funny skits on YouTube, and then Joe, talked to me about Final Fantasy, and he's like, "Hey, we should play all these games." Something I always wanted to do, and then he threw the idea out there for a podcast, and then that was the thing I latched onto. So everything else, the Twitch, the YouTube, the websites, like the streams, all of it, it's just to build the podcast up.
Mhm.
Um, and I think we were wrong-headed in that in a
Mhm.
certain way. And it sounds like you're kind of doing it similarly, but it's mostly YouTube. And the genius idea that you just brought up was you don't put your full episodes on YouTube. And it's one of those things where we
Oh,
do, but
that's the thing.
I
Wait, wait,
mean,
wait a second. No, I actually did put full episodes on YouTube, and that's the thing. It's like it's not realizing that you need to take advantage of the strengths of the platform that you
yes,
decide to be on. And
yes.
actually, clips of the podcast actually do work pretty well because it's not a full commitment. And this is something that I keep telling my friends who are video essayists, who basically are thinking like, I'm going to make, this video an hour and a half, or something like that, and it's going to be a great video. And I'm like, well, wait a second. You understand that, YouTube works because it's a shorter form kind of experience, right? Because once you start hitting the higher commitment time slots, right, of like 30 minutes to an hour and a half, you're literally competing against full motion pictures at this point. And people can disagree with me on this, but like if you really think about like what's trending and what's popular on YouTube, it is that kind of bite-sized video format. And but there's nothing wrong with those big kinds of videos. But I think there's also something to be said about knowing the platform so well that an hour video would be okay. But if your goal with that hour long video is to make money, well, heaven forbid, put some ads inside the video itself. Don't just have an ad at the beginning or at the end, if that's your goal. And
Yeah.
don't complain if people check out, after 10, 12 minutes, because you're, again, it's an expectation thing, right? Like, and I think that's kind of what I forgot myself when I put an hour 16 on YouTube, because I thought like, oh well, this is showing a different side of me, right? Oh, this is more casual and conversational, whereas the people who are on my channel love the higher production values of my videos, like scripted, great editing cuts and all that, which the podcast had none of. And I think, and that's where I basically decided, what, I've been bleeding my audience dry for 4 episodes of this podcast. I'm just going to stop the bleeding right here and say, enough is enough. You want to listen more to this podcast? Download a podcast app. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I totally agree. So for us, we're probably always going to put the full episodes up there on YouTube because some people do
Mm,
have like YouTube Red, and that's how they listen to podcasts. That is a very small percentage of people, though,
yeah.
and that's where I think we went wrong. Is we didn't try to master the platform and
Hmm.
really appeal to the platform to then build onto the podcast audience. We just use it as a repository for everything that we've
Yeah.
ever recorded.
Hmm.
Which there's some great shit in there, but you got to go an hour in, and that no one's going to go an hour
Yeah.
in. So
Exactly.
I think that's a great point. If anyone ever wants to go YouTube, you or any of these platforms, you need to really go for it. And it can still be supplemental and just
Hmm.
be little clips. Like look at
Yeah.
like Joe Rogan's clips
Hmm.
page. Like it's just he has his 4 hour podcast and he clips
Yeah.
great moments from it, and then he gets millions of views. Now, admittedly, no one
Hmm.
no one else is going to get that because they're not Joe Rogan, but the idea is solid. And then
Hmm.
you can say, look, if you want more, like you just said, if you want more of this, go to the podcast. We're not going to put all of the podcast up there, and there's value in that too,
Hmm.
because if they really like you and they like what you're saying and they jive with you, then they can go download the full podcast, and then there's stuff in there that they've never heard.
Right.
Like it's almost like a extended edition. It's like we're giving them Lord of the Rings the regular edition, and then if they want the podcast with like the all the fixins and everything else, they can go get the extended edition on the
Right.
show. And I think there's value in having those things separate,
Hmm.
um, because it does appeal to a different viewer. Like
Yeah.
the podcast. A lot of the people on the podcast, well, the difference between our Twitch subscribers, our YouTube subscribers, and the podcast subscribers, it's like huge. It's like insane,
Hmm. Yeah.
and it's because they're a different subset of people. People who are going to listen to a 2 hour long podcast, they might be someone that wants to go on YouTube and do this other stuff and hang out on Twitch every
Hmm.
once in a while. But for the most part, they're at work. They're at a
Yeah.
manual job where they want something filling their ear holes that they enjoy and they relate to, or they
Hmm.
can laugh at. And that's it. Like, yeah, great, they have a Twitch channel, but I'm at work all day. I'm not going to go
Hmm.
on Twitch. Like, I'm just not
Yeah.
interested in watching somebody play a video game, which I get it. Like, I don't really do that very much either, but
Hmm.
you gotta. I think you really need to hammer down if you're gonna go on a platform. I think that's a great point you made. You need to really utilize what that platform is. Otherwise, you're just kind of treading water. And it
Hmm.
sounds like that's how you felt Um, at least to a certain extent with the well, definitely for Twitch. But
Hmm.
what is it about Twitch that didn't really? I mean, I know you mentioned like the community, but was there like something that was inherent in the platform itself that just didn't jive with you? Like, was it the audience building? I know the the fact that which is the fact that like the top guys make almost everything,
Hmm.
and then everybody else is just struggling, which is kind of like inherent across any industry that's ever existed. So it's important to remember that.
Hmm.
Um,
Right.
like there's billions or like millions of authors, and we only know there's only like 100 household names.
Hmm.
I think it's called Price's Law that kind of describes that, and it's a vicious law, but it is almost always
Yeah.
true.
Hmm.
But other than that, like, was there something within the like just the way the platform worked that didn't work with you? Was it like the way I know you mentioned you do a lot of editing, which
Hmm.
I admire, but we do absolutely none,
Hmm.
pretty much. It is just straight off the cuff. Whatever we did, whatever we said, that's now canon in our
Hmm.
universe.
Yeah.
Um, was that part of it? I mean, like, did you feel more comfortable being not so much in the moment, but being able to like throw together a best of or like a highlight reel of your reviews? Because I've noticed with your channel, when you're reviewing a game, it's a 15-minute video, and it seems like you've got gameplay of you playing it that's pertinent to the moment, which I know is like that's what a lot of people do on YouTube, but we
Hmm.
don't do any of that shit. So is it because of that not wanting to be in the moment, kind of a thing, or like are you more
Hmm.
comfortable doing the editing? Like what makes Twitch so annoying, other than the way that the platform is now, which is just a
Yeah,
free for all,
for
kind of a
sure.
fuck fest.
So, I think I want to be clear by saying that I don't have any sort of personal grudges to anybody who work, on Twitch or at Twitch and use Twitch as a platform. I have a lot of really good friends who are still streaming on Twitch, who are also still Twitch partners and whatnot, and I applaud them for sticking to that platform. My biggest problems in the platform is inherently the fact that once you're in their partnership program, that's there's still an aspect of it that doesn't feel stable, right? And I mentioned the fact that if you are a Twitch streamer and stuff, yes, you can enjoy the work and stuff like that, but admittedly, enjoying the work can only take you so far because at some point you need to figure out ways to put food in the table. And I'm sorry to say, but like in especially during times like COVID, like this is when you know Twitch is being challenged right now as as an income generating platform for people who do love this sort of thing. Because again, there's a difference between what it is now versus back then. Right now, I feel like there's a lot of opportunities for them to monetize people's hard work that is, in my opinion, disproportional to like the amount of effort that people are putting on the platform, right? Like you can stream for like, let's say 8 hours a day as an affiliate and maybe make like, a fraction of what they make in advertising revenue. And you still have to be physically present for that, right? Because heaven forbid, if you put an on-demand Twitch video on there, that their discoverability doesn't work. In other words, whereas the problem that people have in YouTube is the algorithm, the problem on Twitch is the lack of an algorithm. So it's like, which one are you going to pick? The second part is, really the livelihood aspect of it is really important. And I want to be clear by saying, like, I'm not here for the money, but to say that somebody is just in it for that is kind of disingenuous in a way because, there are some there are some people who consider themselves like they really love their job and to try to really improve what they're doing, because and be recognized by that either by monetary value or comments. There's a really popular story that involves Picasso, the artist, where he's sitting at a cafe in Paris, right? and somebody walks up to him because and asks him to draw something on like a piece of napkin, like the cafe napkin and stuff. And so this patron watched Picasso draw and draw and draw and stuff like that. And then, the guy asks how much do you want for this? And Picasso says like, a couple $1 million or something like that. And the dude is like, why do you want a couple $1 million for that? You literally just did this in like 5 minutes. And he says, sir, like I didn't make, this took me like decades to make this. And the whole point of that story is to kind of understand that even though somebody's talents can come out a lot, can produce something a lot faster this day and age, it's not something that was born out of the ether. It didn't just happen to them overnight. It's years of perfecting what they're trying to do, like becoming a really good podcaster, becoming a really good interviewer, becoming a really good video editor. Like you'll fail a lot more times in the beginning than succeed. But you'll notice that the more times you actually start doing it, the more you become really good at what you do. And I think, and the problem with that is that, you can do the same thing. And mine on Twitch, and mind you, we're like 5, 6 years in at this point since I left. The same people who I left, I'm still friends with, are still in the exact same place as they were, even with more work and more frequency of streaming than they did back 5, 6 years ago. And I feel like that shouldn't be the case. You should always be like, you should feel as though you're improving somewhere and you feel rewarded somewhere, whether it's your audience or monetarily. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. That's a big part of the reason why. Part of what you mentioned is that there's a lot of people that are at the top now that don't have to put as much effort in, but you have to remember that they did as much effort as these other guys did or are doing now.
Exactly.
They just probably did it sooner. And I think there's an argument to be made that big YouTube channels, like I don't think it's impossible to make a new big YouTube channel, but I do think it's harder. And I think a lot of the actions YouTube has taken as far as monetization of videos and the platform has created that system, and it almost has perpetuated the exact scenario you're talking about here, where you don't have to be all that interesting
Mm-hmm.
or all that like great at what you're doing. You've been around forever,
Mm-hmm.
and you peaked, and you have a huge audience, and everything you put out is going to get a million views. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think it kind of goes both ways with that, where all of those guys that we're seeing that it seems like they're not doing anything, they did put in all that legwork. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes sometimes people do just get lucky, and there's
Mm-hmm.
a certain
Yeah.
element of that with it. And I feel like the reason why I'm not bagging on either platform. They're fine. I don't
Yeah.
dislike them. I dislike a lot of YouTube's censorship practices, but they can make their own shit decisions. And until I make a YouTube competitor, I can't really say much. Um, I mean, I could be against it, but what am I going to
Yeah,
do?
for sure. Yeah.
But it's like it seems like it's made it easier for those who are already
Mm-hmm.
successful, and that's
Yeah.
what brings it back to what I said earlier about you can't just get a viral video quite the same way as we used to, where you'll find a guy who's like, man, that was really
Mm-hmm.
funny. What else does this guy have? And it's like,
Yeah.
there's nothing else. There's not really
But
anything else.
I do want to kind of chime in though, because do you need to make a viral video though? Because I'd argue that you don't. Because one of the reasons why I switched to YouTube, and we're finally getting to the point of your question, was that you don't need to be live in order to make money on YouTube. Like think about that. Like you just need to package a video that you made however you want, package it up there, and of course, describe it as best as you can without, messing around with the algorithm, and it'll get served as long as there's relevancy in the algorithm, right? And I've been fortunate that a lot of my content are it has is reviews pretty much, but that doesn't mean that if I half-assed it, that it's going to all of a sudden like blow up. And so I guess what I'm trying to say here is that you know unlike Twitch, where you need to be live in order to make money, like I can literally for example, schedule something on Monday to come out, it comes out and it'll get the views. Like I don't have to like literally watch the numbers go up in order for it to make money in a way. And
That's
again, I want
true.
to and I want to say that from a long-term viability perspective, I could do that until like I'm 70 or 80 years old. Like I'll sound older, but I'll still pump out like the same high quality videos as I did like when I was like 40, 30 years younger and stuff. And I wouldn't skip a beat, you know?
Yeah, that's true. I think it's easier on Twitch or on YouTube to be, not to sound insulting, but like you have 10,600 subscribers, which is, that's a way bigger YouTube dick than we've got. But like it's easier to be someone that has 10,600 followers on YouTube than it is on Twitch because
Yes.
YouTube you will get the views and you will get something for it. I
Mm-hmm.
guess the big disconnect for me is I've never I I don't know. I like doing the podcast and I like doing the videos and things like that, but I don't know that I would ever be comfortable making it my full-time job and that's all I
Right.
did. It's always
Mm-hmm.
been like an extra thing and if it were to get to that level, I would gladly take that on.
Mm-hmm.
But the real difficulty that any sort of creator or artist or anything in the creative realm has to really battle with is
Mm-hmm.
that fine line between making ends meet and doing what you really enjoy. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't
Right.
know, I only know a few people that don't enjoy, sitting around and doing what they enjoy all day long. But
Yeah.
it's the ability to make that into, a huge YouTube channel or a large following or something that
Mm-hmm.
not everybody has, and it can
Yeah.
be it can be really disheartening. You put a lot of time
Yes.
into it, and I've known people that have listened to the shows before, like one of our old
Mm-hmm.
listeners who actually took over for me on Super Sexy Swinging Fan Fiction when I left.
Mm-hmm.
His name was Lycan of Light, and he had streamed for I think a year and a half in a row every day.
Mm-hmm.
And he was talking to me one time, and he was like, "Yeah, it's like I think he's quit since then, which is really sad." But
Yeah.
he said, you guys have it, and I just told him, just keep doing it, just be consistent. And that's how it's worked out for us. And he said, well, you guys, it's easy for you to say because you already had the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And my response to that was, well, yeah, but we had to make
Mm-hmm.
the podcast too. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So
Mm-hmm.
it's like and I don't know what it is. I feel like it's like such a hard thing to really get down. And I think Twitch is really fun and
Yeah.
it's a great interactive experience, and a lot of the listeners can come on to the shows or the viewers of your
Mm-hmm.
YouTube or whatever
Yeah.
and see you in person and ask you stuff like in person, and it's
Mm-hmm.
a great time. But I do think YouTube is probably a better route if you're gonna go for, I want this to be my job. I want this
Mm-hmm.
to be something that sustains me outside of just
Yeah.
entertainment or 6 7 hours a week in between putting the
Mm-hmm.
kids down for a nap and when they wake up, like, because
Yeah.
that's kind of where I'm at with it, where I don't I would love for it to be something that like sustained me completely and I didn't have to work my normal job. I could get so
Mm-hmm.
much shit done if I had that
Yeah.
extra 40 50 plus hours a week.
Yeah.
But I don't I don't know, I think I'm a little more, I'm not creative enough, and I'm not willing to edit videos to the same degree that you are to
Yeah.
actually make it happen. But at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, the reason why I'm not doing that could possibly be because of the work. So I think
Mm-hmm.
you almost have to find like the middle ground between those two things, between like actually sustaining yourself outside of your content and then
Mm-hmm.
pushing that content forward.
Yeah.
And it can be really hard because
Mm-hmm.
I you have to get a lot of views and a lot of subscribers to make up for a decent
Mm-hmm.
paying job.
Yeah.
And I see where you're coming from with Twitch
Yeah.
as like a primary platform being so risky because you're right, if you do take time off,
Yeah.
people will leave. There's
Mm-hmm.
there's times where you kind of need to be there, and if you're not there, you lose out on a lot. If you don't get a
Yeah.
good review out of a brand new game that you're a part of the community of, like if we took a year to put a release a review of Final Fantasy 16 when it comes out, like
Hmm.
we're gonna miss out on a lot of potential people that just wanted to hear a podcast on 16, liked us, and then listen to
Yeah.
all the other stuff. If they're over
Yeah.
it by the time we get to it, then you've
Hmm.
missed out on all of those people who were over it that would also be willing to download a podcast also based on Final Fantasy, a video game series. And so it just gets
Hmm.
smaller and smaller and smaller, that window of success.
Yeah.
And if you're not there, you can miss it completely. Well, with
Yeah.
YouTube and the podcast, I would argue, you can pre-record, you can pre-release, you can
Yeah.
have everything set up, and it's
Hmm.
not as big of a deal where you get punished for kind of relaxing. So to me,
Right.
all of this is supplemental. Um,
Yeah.
and I don't know if I if I would ever take the risk. Maybe if I pay off my townhouse and I get another home, then I can, like, okay, maybe
Yeah.
we'll do it more full time. But
Sure.
I can see how the platform itself,
Hmm.
it sort of just makes it difficult to be you. You got
Yeah.
a good sized
Well,
following on YouTube,
thank you.
uh, and your videos get a good chunk of views, at least as far as
Hmm.
I'm concerned, compared to our shit. Like, and on Twitch, that wouldn't really amount to much, and
Yeah.
that
Well,
that's what you pretty much what you were saying, and not to
thank
bag on
you.
the platform or
Yeah.
anything, but it's like, yeah,
So yeah, I mean, to kind of build, to kind of answer a lot of your concerns and stuff, it's like, I think the biggest realization I had when I switched over from Twitch to YouTube is it's not really like how many things you can occupy yourself with, but the real question is how much of one thing can you do extremely well to the point where you can polish it to a mirror sheen that it like completely like blows away the competition, right? Because I understand the temptation of doing multiple podcasts. Like I was there like back 2009, 2010. I had like two or three different podcasts at the same time, which, I'll be frank, ruined my relationship because I didn't have time for, my girlfriend at the time. But it's, because I understand that thought process too, because like the whole idea is like, well, you're diversified, right? Because there's many types of advisors out there, like even in stock market, they're like diversify, diversify, diversify. But the internet doesn't work that way, and especially from a creative standpoint, it doesn't really work that way either. Because what you're doing is you're basically becoming Tim Allen from like Home Improvement. You're kind of a master of a whole bunch of things, or rather, you are knowledgeable in a whole bunch of things. You're not really mastering one thing. And
yeah,
and the problem with that is that yeah, sure, your name is out there, but it is the same two, three people that listen to your other podcasts. That's not right. And so I kind of started kind of really thinking about like what was important to me when I go make Backlog Battle and in another form, right, on YouTube. And this is kind of like where all of that experience from Twitch and also that podcast kind of like really came together. And I started asking like, okay, so what do I really care about? And I thought to myself, well, I really don't care a lot about like the negativity in the game industry these days. Like I really don't give a shit about that. I'm sorry. Like, I'm not interested in rehashing 1,000 different people saying the same crap on their own YouTube channels. Because frankly, it's noise at this point. If I add one more voice to that, it's not really going to add to the conversation, right? And and I also looked at what other people are doing in terms of game reviews, and I kind of felt that a lot of them started becoming more mechanical, or that they're using it as a platform uh, to make a statement, right? Like something beyond what the game is actually conveying. In other words, they're using the game as a conversation piece for something else, whether politically or culturally or what have you, which is fine. But again, I'm not interested in that. Like, I feel as though because it's almost like you're building so much like kind of excess on top of gaming that people have forgotten to enjoy gaming for what it is, especially from when we started, gaming like back in the good old days and stuff, right? Now, I'm not
Yeah.
saying that we need to get back to that. What I'm saying is we need to remind ourselves that video games are here to entertain first and foremost, and then everything else outside of that can exist as well. And and I find that a lot of the kind of arguments online that surround video games are about the veneer, the cover, the thing that is on top of what people inherently apply to video games themselves. It's kind of like it's almost like the conversation like back in like about a decade or two about how indie movies are so pure and so so much more important than all the mainstream fluff. Like this kind of weird elitism when it comes to like perceiving some like an entertainment medium, right? Like yes, you that is also a valid perspective. But to think that everybody should agree with that perspective is kind of balls. I'm sorry. Like,
Yeah, I mean, I see where you're coming from, and a lot of it's tough because to me, gaming and movies and things like that, like I don't want them to be filled with like or like people's opinions on the games. I don't want it to be filled with, political opinions or anything like that unless the game sort of invites itself in to
mm-hmm,
that. Like when we reviewed Ghost of Tsushima, I was like I'm kind of bothered by the fact that he just gave up, all those years of tradition to kind of do this thing. But I liked the fact that they made that a difficult choice for the character. You know what I mean? Like
right.
that.
Mm-hmm,
To me, that's like I like that they respected the culture of Japan while also acknowledging we have to move
mm-hmm,
forward or we're gonna all die from these Mongols in the game. Like I
right.
appreciated that. So I think bringing up points like that are one thing, but I agree. People come in with an objective
Mm-hmm,
and then and it's fine because that's the beauty of art. That's the beauty of
yeah.
the gaming industry for 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 to a certain degree. The beauty of it
Yeah.
is the whole point of it. It's like everyone's going to get something different out of it. The
Mm-hmm,
problem that I think you're hitting on is people. There is a certain subset of people that don't like that fact, and they want you to get what they got out of it, and that's where it
mm-hmm,
becomes like super toxic. And it's like, ugh, I know, like I get it, like that like, there are problems in society, and there are things like that, but like, can we just enjoy the game? Like, it doesn't
mm-hmm,
have to always be
right.
like FF7 is purely a political statement on the climate and on like pollution and stuff like that. And I was like, yeah, I mean, it has those themes, but it also
Mm-hmm,
has identity themes. It has themes on, your responsibility to the planet, being a good steward of the planet. It's like it's not just the one thing, but people that
mm-hmm,
are really into the one thing tend to make it all about the one thing, and
mm-hmm.
it's good to raise the
It,
to like discuss those ideas, but that
mm-hmm,
it does become that way online where most of the videos are
yeah.
just here's what I believe and here's the thing that proves it right, and it's like, look,
Mm-hmm,
man, I get it, like I understand where you're coming from,
yeah.
but really, and I don't know
Yeah.
if you feel that way about games and movies, and like I used
Um.
to do it with sports, but I don't watch sports anymore. I just don't have time.
Yeah.
But it's like
Yeah.
I like it to be it's something like that's almost a thing in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
And too
Yeah.
much projection just kind of like turns
Yeah.
me off to it almost.
Yeah, I definitely, yeah, in that sense, we both really agree on this because again, like there is a place for a lot of these different conversations that are brought about by games. I think right now the problem is that there is too much of it that it kind of overshadows, the point of the enjoyment of the medium itself, right? It's the thing that I can liken it to is the coverage of COVID last year, right? There was a point where literally there, and also politics, I guess, last year where it came to a head where, there was so much bad stuff like online in all of our social network feeds that we invented a word that is now in the dictionary that actually defines what that means, which is doom scrolling. That is indicative of what, of the fault of a lot of these algorithms where it's like, well, it's really popular, you might like this, right? Not knowing the
Yeah.
fact that there is a kind of psychological impact to seeing a lot of this negativity, which is why, like, there's some people who recluse themselves from social media completely because of so much negativity. And,
Yeah.
and, and yeah. And mind you,
It,
like
it,
this idea for Backlog Battle, like preceded a lot of that because I knew, going into YouTube, I knew even then that that this is going to be uncontrollable. Like this negativity was going to be uncontrollable, whether it's politics, gaming, or otherwise. Like there is only so much that your brain can accept in terms of like input that all of a sudden it's just going to be noise eventually, right?
yeah. Yeah, and I mean it has major effects. I mean it has the effect of, hey, you like, you search this video, here's a bunch of videos that are only from a certain viewpoint or a certain like
Mm-hmm.
complaint in the culture, whether it's politics, whether it's the cultural discussion, and those
Mm-hmm.
two things are almost melded into one, which is really disturbing. It should not be.
Right.
That should not be how it is, but it's
Mm-hmm.
the algorithms do sort of radicalize people, and they make everyone becomes like a straw man master. Like they're great at knowing what no one else thinks, basically. Like, yeah, there might be
Mm-hmm.
like 1% of the population on the opposing view of whatever you're talking about that actually
Right.
thinks this ridiculous caricature of what you're saying, but you
Mm-hmm.
believe that that's all that there is because there's nothing else showing you otherwise because of the
Mm-hmm.
way these things are meant. And it's almost like an Ouroboros, it's like it's
Yeah.
eating itself alive by
Mm-hmm.
promoting these videos and gaining revenue for YouTube itself. It's almost destroying its concept because then it's just this hugely divisive platform with like
Mm-hmm.
people that think things that no one like think that half of the user base or half of the country or half of whatever thinks things that no one thinks, and it's like a self-perpetuating machine. And I think that did come to a major head last year. And I like that and the same thing for us. Like we really try to not talk politics at all.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's we might throw in a joke or two here and there, just bagging on everybody, but we try to
Mm-hmm.
not make it one-sided or anything like that because
Yeah.
we're not here to talk about that. Like that's not my wheelhouse, and
Mm-hmm.
everyone else that's going to be listening to us, it's not their wheelhouse either. So
Yeah.
why add to the noise on these
Mm-hmm.
issues? And it's like, dude, like I,
Yeah.
it's all we're doing is playing games here. We're reviewing
Yeah.
games, like we're discussing the artistic value of games. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I
Yeah.
think you hit on it perfectly when you said there's people that it's almost like they have certain ideas and then they go into it and then they only pull those ideas and then they're like, well, that's what it is, and
Mm-hmm.
now you have to deal with it. And it's like,
Yeah.
well, no, like it's partly that, but it's also like 12 other things. Like that's the
Mm-hmm.
beauty of it. And then you can't say that,
Yeah.
if I don't think you're 100% right, then I'm wrong because it's a piece of art. The whole point of art is that it's different for everybody. It's the eye
Mm-hmm.
of the beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So
Yeah.
you and I
Yeah.
think that's what makes channels like yours, as successful as they are. I know you probably everyone wants more and more success, which is great,
Mm-hmm.
but having that, just sitting down and appreciating the art for what it
Mm-hmm.
is great. And I feel like we've tried to do that with
Yeah.
Ultimate Final Fantasy too, where we'll have a game like Dirge of Cerberus where it's a major betrayal to Final Fantasy VII's lore, and
Yeah.
I can't stand that they have deep ground looking characters in the new 7 remake
Mm-hmm.
trailer with Yuffie, and like it's like, oh my god, this stuff again. But like there's
Mm-hmm.
still good things to the game,
Yeah.
and I feel like people a lot of times they just like to bag on stuff, and it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, you can bag on it,
Mm-hmm.
but like you can't tell me that there's nothing good about
Mm-hmm.
you know this game. There's generally always something good
Mm-hmm.
to be had.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think a lot of times you kind of get people who are like the snarky online personas, and they kind of try to dominate, and then everyone wants to be that. But what
Mm-hmm.
everyone forgets is that after a while, that just gets grating. And like you said, it
Yeah.
just becomes noise, and you just don't want to hear it anymore.
Yeah.
And yeah, and on Twitch, I've had people like that I followed for years that did stuff. And I'm not like a big Twitch user or anything. I'll hang out with
Right.
like listeners who fire up streams and things like that, people that I have been associated with for the shows over the years. But like
Mm-hmm.
there have been people that and like they would post like, oh, I need X amount of subs to like make
Hmm.
rent and stuff like that, or like do this and do that. And they it almost seemed like and I don't know if totally where I'm going with this, but like with the way that I don't know, it was just like it felt really negative to me. Like it felt like
Yeah.
I don't know, like I put myself in this like to me, and I'm always like, well, you didn't have to move, to another country or whoever it was. I can't remember who the person was on Twitch. And then now it's like really tough. It's like, well, yeah, it's tough
Hmm.
because you moved away from all your family and you're relying completely on like the
Yeah.
generosity of strangers.
Yeah.
And it almost became like it felt like I wasn't supposed to be there because I wasn't willing to monetarily support. And so like
Right.
it sort of ruined it. And to me it was kind of that same miasmatic negativity
Uh-huh.
to it that just kind of turned me off. And
I see.
that's I think there's endless amounts of that on YouTube, Twitch, all of it. It's just
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
There
It's I
really,
don't know.
there really is. Yeah, absolutely. Like, and even from what you said, right? Like, I remember when I was a big fan of Young Ye before he started doing like all the Jim Sterling-y kind of stuff. And mind you, I love Jim Sterling, I love Young Ye, but do I need two of them? Right? Do I need you to basically talk about the same things over and over? And that's kind of like also when I realized that, okay, there's too many of this. And so I want to do something where it makes a difference, right? And so, about like sometime last year, or maybe it was like a little bit even over a year ago, um, I kind of started thinking about my mission statement. And that sounds really corporate, but I do find that as long as you take a concept and use it for good, it doesn't have to be used for evil, right? And the reason why I had to create a mission statement was so that way, if I felt lost, and a lot of creative people feel lost from time to time, right? Like, because there are times where you think about like what to do next, but you don't know what direction you want to take it. And so I made a mission statement where I could just literally look at it and be reminded of like, okay, this is why you made the channel. This is why you're so passionate about it. Go towards that direction. And I call it kind of like my foundation as well. Like that's another way that I call it. And when I started kind of thinking about the foundations of Backlog Battle, it became very clear to me that, what that mission was and what you're basically, and the simplified kind of slogan for it is discover, play together. And what's interesting about the slogan is that taken individually, yes, discover, play together are three very descriptive words, but taken together, it kind of means something completely different, and you can't do that individually in like other languages. Unfortunately, I discovered that last year when I asked some of my foreign fans to translate it into their own language, and you can't do the same thing that I wanted to do in those languages. But the whole point of that slogan is to basically, to kind of paraphrase it in a bit, is to kind of bring together the community again, through the discovery and enjoyment of playing video games, to kind of remind ourselves that, first and foremost, video games are fun. It can be all these other things, but they were made to be fun first and foremost. Now, arguably, we can critique them. We could be praising of them, but at the end of the day, we still need to respect each other as a gaming community in order for us to actually get back to the enjoyment of the games that we play. And so that's why, that's kind of like how I've made all of the videos in my channel, is to be more inclusive, so that way you watch a video for, I don't know, for like Littlewood, which is a game that I would never usually play until I discovered it, and be able to watch it and say, hey, I'm not usually a fan of this kind of game, but you introduced me to a game that I would normally not play, like a genre, and I'm going to try it and kind of revel in the excitement surrounding that game. Like if you look at the comment threads of all of my reviews and stuff, like, there's a lot of enjoyment and excitement there for playing video games. There's very rarely that somebody actually comes in there and be critical and, just, be really crappy and stuff. Because, for one thing, like, it's all about the community that you cultivate. And I think that, you know, one of the things that me and my mods like work really hard to do is to make sure that the environment for commenting is safe, feels safe for people, right? Like it's not like another Twitter or another, you know, Markiplier comment thread, which, you know, you look at that and it's like super crazy, right? And super uh, almost unmanageable in a way where you don't, you know, you sometimes don't understand what's going on. And I bring up Markiplier because I love the guy, but second of all, like I went to his Discord and he literally has like 5 general chats when I first opened his Discord, and it's just like waves and waves of text just scrolling on screen, and I'm like, I don't understand what the hell's going on here. And I told
Yeah.
myself, you know, like it's great that he has to deal with that because I don't have to right now. But you get my point though. It's a you build the foundation for the thing that you want to create, and then you build on top of that ever so slowly. And because I feel like the foundations have been so strong for Backlog Battle ever since the beginning, you know, we've just been kind of slowly been able to grow that, not just the channel and the subscription base, but also the viewership and also the community as well. Because you know they feel safe coming back to our channel, knowing that you know they're not going to find anything controversial or anything. I'm not going to all of a sudden be like Jim Sterling or Young Ye, and there's a peacefulness to that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense, and I definitely think there's a underserved part of the community that needs that very thing.
Yeah.
What I always end up doing is I just turn the shows into like a comedy show that's also about Final Fantasy or about this
Yeah.
and that. That way, if you know, for Nude Clan, it's more of a thing. If we didn't get done with what we needed to get done with, like a game for a review, then we are just, it's established that it's us just
Hmm.
riffing, and
Yeah.
sometimes we play games. Like
Hmm.
it's, and it's like super, you know, we're super offensive and we say like crazy things, and all is like all is like a joke
Hmm.
essentially. But
Yeah.
you know, it, I don't know. It's like it's the opposite of what every comedian does, where a comedian is really into like Game of Thrones or something, and then they make a
Hmm.
podcast. It's like we made the
Yeah.
podcast first, and then we just use it as a way to
Hmm.
like joke around.
Yeah.
But that is a good idea. The whole like mission statement, like just remembering what the whole point of everything that you're trying to do is. Um,
Hmm.
and of course we have an LLC, so I mean I don't mind the corporation. It might sound corporate to you, but that's, I mean, shit, we have
Yeah.
one. So,
Yeah,
uh,
it's, you know, what's kind of interesting is like, you know, having made these videos for Backlog Battle and stuff, like you know, I still think of it as like, hey, you know, I want to make something. Like you know, I want my peoples to care about the thing that I make videos on too, you know? Like for example, today when we're recording this, I released a video on like a game that nobody in the visual novel community knows about, like at least the ones that I talk to. And I think I posted a teaser post on this last week, and I said like, oh yeah, if you love visual novels or just lover of well-told stories, you're gonna love it. And what's funny is like, of course, like in the comment thread, they kept on trying to guess like what the hell it is. It's like, is it Higurashi? Is it Utawari Rumina? Is it Zero Escape? And every single time I replied with like, no one will be able to guess what I have in store. And just like the same comment over and over. And of course, today it came out, and somebody's like, yeah, you're right. There's no way we could have guessed this because we don't even know what the hell this is, you know? And, uh,
yeah,
and, and that's kind of part of the, you know, it's part of the charm of the channel right now is because it's like, yes, you get like some really high quality reviews, but at the same time, you kind of get some unpredictability because I love kind of experimenting with video, you know, and you know, I mentioned earlier in the show that you gotta start with something that's simple, right? Like do one thing really, really well. And I don't really think that I mastered reviews, but I'm getting better at it every single time I release one. But also like, you know, there's moments where you need to kind of let loose and be yourself in a way. Um, I think that's kind of like what I like about what you're doing and stuff with all of the projects that you have is because you know that you want to do podcasts, and you're kind of sticking to your guns and like really trying to, improve on it as much as you can with the resources that you have. Because, you know, like you said earlier, not everybody gets the opportunity to do this for a full-time job, but doesn't really have to be though. Like, doesn't have to always lead to making money and stuff. Like, sometimes it just
Yeah.
needs to be a fun thing. And that's where I kind of go to the point where like you have to ask yourself, what is your measure of success, right? And for me, my measure of success is to actually build a community of people who are just kind of, who just want to enjoy games again and not have to deal with all the drama that surrounds games. In fact, like I'll be honest, like in our Discord, like our mission, if not mission statement, but like I'll read to you like what it actually says, like on the very top of the page. It says, "Our Discord is a safe haven for gamers to set aside the trials and tribulations of the outside world and to allow themselves to express their love for gaming without fear of judgment." Basically means if you have drama like about games, leave it out the door because nobody's going to entertain you. And I know that sounds really strict, right? But I find that because we've created that space, that safe space for our community, they're actually able to talk more and just really relish on the fact that games, can be fun. And even within our community on Discord, people have played games that they never would have played before, which kind of continues the whole, mission of Backlog Battle in a way. So, and again, like, it really is about what you want at the end of the day. Like, do you want money? Do you want community? Do you want great videos? And focusing on that. And to that end, like, I want to kind of segue a little bit because I think this is rather important. There's $1 trillion company that well, that first of all, they got the $1 trillion for no, not because of luck, but because they did exactly what I've been doing, which is keep it simple, stupid. And that's Apple, right? Like they're not, they've tried to, they've defied convention every single time, much to the, like the hate that they were getting with a lot of people. Like, oh, you're not going to have a phone that has a replaceable battery, blah, 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 blah. You're going to fail. And of course, they started the whole touchscreen revolution in that industry, right? Same with
Right.
music, although Spotify is kind of kicking their ass on that. Tablets, hardware and software and all that stuff. Like there is a reason why this company was the first company to get to $3 trillion, and it's not by overcomplicating shit. They said we're gonna do things that we do really well, and if we're missing something, we'll try to get somebody to help us out. And
Yeah.
and they've done great with that.
That's the sign of like a truly great leader is it's not someone that knows how to do everything, it's someone that knows everyone that knows what they don't know. And
Yeah,
someone that knows what they don't know and is willing to acknowledge that. It's
yeah,
a very important aspect of it. You don't have to be a master of everything because that's impossible. You need to
mm-hmm,
know, you need to know people or different companies to do those things that you're not interested in that you need done, and now you
mm-hmm.
can focus on doing your thing. Yeah,
And
that's
doing
really cool.
just and again, like importantly, is doing one thing really well, right? Like, because that's, a lot of us try to think of the shortcuts, right? Like, I do personally think that a lot of people who go to Twitch these days have this idea that they could easily hit it big on Twitch just by brute forcing it and spending the time to do so with no regard to their personal health. And that to me is worrying because health has been a much more important part of my life, even though I don't practice it sadly over the past, few years. Because we're going to age at some point. We're going to get to the point where like 40, 50, 60. And do you really think like that, doing 24, 48-hour streams is going to be healthy for you at like 54 years old? I don't think so. You're going to pass out. You're going to pass out. And we got to think, you got to think smaller. You got to think simpler. And once you find that and you hone in on that talent, like you'd be really surprised how much great content you can make and how much great things you can make. Not just content, but like just in general. And I think that's advice I can give to you is like if you still feel a bit rocky and stuff like somewhere, like ask that question inside and be like, yeah, what, for one thing, what do I want to really do? And number two, how can I set about achieving that goal with what I have, not what I don't have? So yeah.
All right, that's great advice, man. Well, shoot, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on and um, test out my interviewing skills, I suppose. It's been crazy how long it's been since we
Hmm.
hung out that one time. And then I remember there's also a real quick tangent. There's a picture that we took of like the wall of Final Fantasy 14 where people were signing
Hmm.
their little like that whatever world they were in, I think is what it was, or
Yeah.
the free company. I
Hmm.
can't remember what it was, but
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
were signing their usernames, and we took a picture, and I was like, "Oh, look, it's us!" And then also over
Yeah.
there is Lemon Break Radio. That's crazy. And then you
Hmm.
messaged, and they're like, "Yeah, and that's me signing the wall." And I was like, "What?" Like we were all there. Like it's been
Yeah.
that long, but it's
Hmm.
awesome to see where everything's ending up now. And of course, we're not done by any stretch of
Hmm.
the imagination. I've got like 15 great podcast ideas that I can't even start
Jeez.
doing until
Hmm.
I get done with Ultima, at the very least. But you know,
Yeah.
we're far from done. But it's cool to see finally like check in and see where we're at thus far.
Yeah.
And as far as
Absolutely.
like the end goal and all of that goes, I've already passed the 27 curse, so I obviously didn't get famous enough before I was 27 to suddenly die. So I guess it's just downhill from here. I don't know.
I don't think so. I will say that, I hit my stride when I hit 40. And so I don't think
Yeah,
it's the end. In fact, like, I do believe now that I am of this age that 40 is probably one of the most creative times of my entire life, like, and most satisfying. So you're on your way there. Something to look forward to.
yeah, yeah. I got a little ways to go. I'm just turned 30 this year, but
Oh
still,
God. Yeah.
yeah. You look great though. I mean, shit. I think I feel like I look older than
Oh my
you.
gosh.
So you're doing
Well,
something right.
it's the Asian genes.
Oh yeah, I definitely don't have those. So oh, what did I say one time? I was like, it's like a stick of juicy fruit. It's like really good, and then like once you hit like 70 or 80, then you age like insanely fast. But up until then, it's the golden age for
Yeah,
you, I suppose. But
sure
damn,
is.
yeah, that's awesome, man. Keep up the great work on the YouTube. I really love the concept for Backlog Battle. Like I'm kind of obsessed with it, just like because I have all these crazy games that I've bought that I just haven't played. You know, like Rising Zan, the Samurai Gunman, and like
Uh-huh.
just like Hooters Road Trip. I found out existed like 4 months ago and instantly
Wow.
ordered it. I was like, oh my god, like what the hell is this? So there's all
Yeah.
these crazy games, and the concept you have is it's just so genius.
Yeah.
And I love the idea that you were talking recently, like just really niche games and things that
Hmm.
like no one's ever really heard of and no one could guess, and just
Yeah.
throwing out a review of that. Like it's a really cool idea, and I honestly wish it was my idea, but it was yours, and so that's why I had you on.
It's,
So I wanted to,
sometimes, yeah, and definitely thank you for that. I think, as I always tell people, like, there's that age old adage and stuff, like, it's like great artists copy, good artists steal. Or good, no, it's actually the opposite. It's good artists copy, great artists steal. And the way that I interpret that is like it's not enough to just like kind of copy somebody else's idea, because a lot of people will do that. It's more that you understand why they're doing that. And you
yeah,
know I will tell you that there have been many copiers of my idea, but they still at the very heart kind of missed the mark, if that makes sense. So I'm happy
right.
that the soul of Backlog Battle is still intact in a way.
I get you. It totally makes sense, and that's true. We did totally rip off numerous other. Well, Joe mostly did. I didn't listen to podcasts at the time, but
Yeah.
as he's over the years revealed the shows that he listened to at the time, It's
Hmm.
almost like the original Doom soundtrack. Like you can piece together what albums the creator gave the guy to make the music based off of, because it's kind of like almost a carbon copy of it.
Yeah,
You do take the greatness from others and then you use it in your own way. Um,
for sure.
that's a good way to go about it. But maybe one of
Absolutely.
these days I'll do some kind of backlog deal, but possibly it's like a just part of the other shows. Because
For sure.
I want to do these weird ass PlayStation games that I have for
Yeah,
just like it's such a weird PS1 and 2, so many weird titles, but they just need to be.
absolutely.
The people need to know. They need to know
Yeah,
they exist. But cool,
absolutely.
man. Yeah, I really appreciate it again.
Hmm.
Best of luck for your future endeavors on the YouTube, and hope we can collaborate again. This has
Yeah,
been
man.
fun. I'm addicted to podcasts, so anything I can do to fuel that addiction is certainly appreciated. So thank
Hey,
you.
like, are you hinting that you want to be on the podcast? Is that what's happening here?
I would never insinuate such a thing. But if I were to receive a summons, I would dutifully arrive at the predetermined time.
Okay, that sounds
That's
good.
one of my ongoing jokes is there's nothing I love more than going on a podcast that's better than mine, and it's like always from one of my listeners that puts together a really great show, and I'm like, man,
Mhm.
it's great to be here and see just how much better you guys do it.
Oh my
So,
gosh. It's,
but yeah,
yeah, that said, like, I'm always honored to be on anybody else's podcast and stuff apart from my own. Because sometimes, like, I keep thinking to myself, like, man, like, am I just doing this for my own entertainment and people listening? But, thankfully, lately, my audience has been way more active and stuff, in terms of letting me know that they love what they've been listening to. And for the people out there who haven't listened yet, is this the time where I plug my stuff, or like, are you gonna do that for me? How's this gonna work?
go to town.
Okay, so as Caleb said, like, my podcast is called the Backlog Battle Podcast. You can find that on Spotify, Anchor, iTunes, Apple Podcasts. That's what they call it these days, and Google Podcasts, and any other podcasting software that you have. And I think Anchor is really good though because you can actually stream it. You don't have to download it. So I highly recommend that one. Same thing with Spotify. Both of those are great. And of course, you can check out my reviews of JRPG, niche games, and a lot of Japanese games and indies as well on youtube.com/backlog battle. And, just say hi. They have a lot of community posts there. I'm also on Twitter, twitter.com/my backlog battle. I post a lot of updates there and just general shenanigans, gaming wise. I retweet a lot of things and tweet a bunch of pretty cool stuff too. So, but yeah, man, thanks for having me. It's been a real pleasure. And yeah, who knows? Maybe you'll show up on my podcast too, huh? Maybe. Who knows?
Maybe who can say what the future holds.
Yeah!